So, hello everybody.
Hey,
This is
Jose,
Brandon
quiet.
Buchanan, and
Hey,
hopefully you've had just a great time. I'm really looking forward to spending just a great 45 minutes to an hour to really however long it is,
same.
talking to you guys about Venezuela, about foreign policy, about history, and according to the YouTube descriptions, we've got to tell at least two jokes during the time of this broadcast, and so we'll keep our eye open for those opportunities.
Hey, anything to
This is
forget about
What
these
hit
supposed to
me
be
days.
was,
comedy.
what does the average person know
Because
about
news
Venezuela?
was not an
Having
option.
seen it in the news, I think the average person just hears United States and Latin America, and they put their hands over their eyes, and they get a little spooked because I just think every high school person hears details that aren't very wholesome and good, and then they stop paying attention from there.
I think the average person, I think the average American hasn't even heard of Venezuela, maybe until the news came out. And Venezuela could be in Australia or Asia for all most Americans now.
I feel differently because when I was in high school, I knew several Venezuelans, and
Mm-hmm.
so that kind of, made me exposed to Venezuela somewhat. But
Good.
uh, I do think that um, what I heard about Venezuela was mostly very negative. Like
Definitely.
the kids who talked about going there, the kids who were Venezuelan, they were like, "Yeah, I went to Venezuela and it was bad. Like the bad parts of Mexico, like cartels, cutting people up and leaving them out
Mm-hmm.
as warnings and stuff."
Or those YouTube videos of people talking about, oh, we had, oh, a $20 can get you literally everything in Venezuela and
And
stuff
that
like
was
that.
back in like probably 2013,
Yeah.
2012.
Mm-hmm. For
I'm thinking,
me, I'm Jewish, and I've known Jews from all over the world, and there is quite a number of Jews from Latin and South America, including Venezuela, and a lot of what they call themselves refugees. Definitely see places like that, particularly Venezuela, in a rather negative life. It kind of reflects how people view other similar types of governments, like those in Cuba. Like like we escaped to have a better life, that sort of a thing, and definitely rather negative views towards Nicolas Maduro, the head of the Bolivaran government there, for example.
so I've also met a
It's
person.
so interesting that we've all got. I mean, it's so interesting that we've all got slightly different perspectives. When I
Mm-hmm.
think of Venezuela, one of my favorite baseball players was from the Atlanta Braves, the big cat Andres Galarraga, and
Right,
he was a Venezuelan player.
Yeah.
And
right.
I, of course, also thought, I mean, geopolitics is what you think of when you think of Latin America and the global South or whatever. Uh, I definitely think of Venezuela through a geopolitical standpoint. That was one of the first things I heard about Venezuela in terms of like a history class and digging deep into that space on the map. Um, but
I mean,
yeah, that's it.
geographically, I think it's a beautiful country. Aside
And
from all of that,
diverse.
that's something that, you know, we're talking about the way that we first were hearing about it
Mm-hmm.
through the news and through people who have been there. But like when you actually just see video, it's a beautiful place. It's the natural, beauty of it and the culture. I play an instrument that's from Venezuela, which I think is pretty cool.
What's it called?
It's called the Quattro Venezolano.
Ooh,
Do you guys want to hear it?
The entire Yes,
that's
but
a good
the
idea.
entire planet of
Maybe I'll
Earth could
play
be
us out with that.
considered a beautiful
Yeah,
place,
that'd be a good way to end it.
except for parts of Missouri. There's one of your two jokes. There you go.
I will also say I met a person who, when I was like fresh out of high school, I think I was with my family on a trip and we took an Uber, and the driver was someone who had been part of the Venezuelan opposition who was seeking asylum in America,
Mm-hmm.
and I spoke to them in Spanish and I asked them about at this time I was like a right wing libertarian,
Mm-hmm.
and I was like, "Oh my gosh, Venezuela! You're from Venezuela. Is that like, is it really so bad because of socialism?" And he was like, he told me, "No, no es porque de mal concepción de socialism." And I kind of thought like that's a misconception, but mal concepción is more like there's a word for misconception as well. Mal concepción is more like he feels that Maduro is like perverted socialism,
Yeah.
almost, or bended it
too as well.
or whatever. But the point is that guy was still a supporter of what he saw as socialism, and that kind of made me rethink what socialism really meant.
Mm-hmm.
But in terms of Venezuela today, that is the thing, is the news and, the media that you're exposed to, the discourse, puts Venezuela up as kind of like Cuba, the socialist country of the Americas.
Oh, the media vilifies it till the cows come home.
Well, aside from that, it's put up as the socialist country. What do you guys think? Is Venezuela a socialist country?
Well,
These definitions mean little to me. Like, is China a socialist country? Is Norway a socialist country? I guess this is like a regular discourse that people love to have. And my answer is that no country is socialist or capitalist.
Yeah, that makes a certain kind of sense. I think,
But that might be an oversimplification. Like, it's not
I
as
do
fun
think
for
it's-
takes.
I do
Like,
think
if
it's
there's
just an oversimplification to the point of maybe like throwing the baby out with the bathwater. I feel like the discussion is, in socialism versus capitalism, is to what extent is the wealth controlled by the people versus individuals, private individuals. But that becomes complicated if you have a state that's like, this body represents the will of the people, and they substitute in for the people. And then, I mean, in the case of Venezuela, to me, I think it is a lot like Norway in that,
like a welfare state.
yeah, in that what the sense in which Venezuela is said to be like economically socialist. Now there are some like communes that exist in Venezuela that have a little like more leeway from the government than they probably would in the U.S.
Yeah, and an important thing that both Norway and Venezuela have deeply in common is that their government infrastructure is funded by deep well of natural resources. For Norway, a deep reservoir offshore of natural gas and petroleum. The largest reserves
That's
in
very
the world
true.
in petroleum in the case of Venezuela.
That was my main point I was leading to. The commune thing is marginal. The Venezuelan economy is founded on the oil, which it's owned by a state company. So the state nationalized the oil, I think, under Chavez, and this this is the situation in Mexico as well. But for Venezuela, there's just a lot more of stuff that relies on oil money coming in, which then is handed out. But in a way like Norway, where you have, you would call it state capitalism because state bureaucrats essentially become capitalists. You have a state-run oil company, and I don't know how that compares to Saudi Aramco. I think it's similar, where oil prices fluctuate, affect like the benefits people can get.
Well, it's funny that you point that out because Venezuela is a founding member of an organization called OPEC, and that's the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries. Actually, do you know, Quiz question. Do you know in which city OPEC is headquartered in?
Are you about to say Caracas?
I am not.
No, I was about to say, I would be really surprised. I actually
You'll
would
be
think,
It must
surprised, I
not be
promise.
Riyadh. Yeah, it must not be Riyadh, or else there you wouldn't have
I
asked. So
would
it
think
must be a
Riyadh or
surprising
Abu
question.
Dhabi.
See, I'd think that too, but it's actually in Vienna, Austria.
Wow.
Well, it's kind of like Switzerland. It's a country known for political neutrality, so that's one of the reasons why they picked its location to be there.
Yeah.
When you're OPEC, it doesn't matter where you're headquartered because you can always afford the gas.
Yeah, and what OPEC does is they basically agree on the prices and the amount of petroleum that is held in reserve or sold off to different companies into other countries.
They're what we call an international cartel.
Yeah,
Say that
cartel.
neutrally.
Yes.
They work together to keep the prices
Yeah.
at a certain level for the benefit of all of them.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the economic definition of a cartel. And so my point with the Norway thing is Norway also does the same thing where they have a state oil company, and this feeds a public fund that goes to welfare stuff. And this is literally this is the oil stuff that the people in the government want, to be honest with you. It's owned literally by the government, so they're going after the government. Not that I want to support the government of Venezuela or anything, because it is very repressive, but it's kind of in some way their way of...
Can you elaborate a little bit on why I think the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela is repressive?
Well, like I said, I met a guy who had to flee as a refugee, and so that's why it was his reason for living in Florida, because his membership in another socialist party, and I'm not sure which one it was, but it was other than the ruling one, which I think would be the United Socialist Party, would be the ruling one of Maduro. Let me check that. But he was part of some other party. But he was telling me that I think repressive is part of the picture. There's also just kind of a chaotic situation there where, like, there are multiple different militias and paramilitary groups operating against each other, and
There are paramilitary groups there. There are political prisoners. There's independent monitors get expelled there all the time. There's allegations of torture. In terms of are they good, don't try to get me to say that everything's perfect over there.
Yeah, well,
Yeah, like it's like in any debate or conversation, I'd yield that there definitely is anti-democratic activity in Venezuela for sure.
and yet the Bolivarian Revolution does have a profoundly democratic element. That is kind of the key element to it.
Venezuelan history has a profoundly democratic element. What
Yeah.
you're seeing now is the reaction to, of course, extreme neoliberalism in the 50s, 60s, 70s that also had human rights violations and anti-democratic activity. You couldn't argue that Maduro or Chavez introduced those things to the public.
Yeah, but after decades of economic collapse and strife within Venezuela in the later 20th century, that laid the opportunity for socialism to take control of the government in the dawn of the 21st century.
Well, let's go back.
Let's go back.
Let's talk about how it actually happened, because it kind of comes down, in this case, in a particular way, to a single man, Hugo Chavez, and obviously not only him, but all the people around him and the circumstances that put him in that place in history. But he was president. He was winning the presidency already for like another time
Mm-hmm.
when he became a socialist in 2006,
Mm-hmm.
and um,
Yeah, he did that. He did that after a coup. I mean, his leftward turn. I mean, we don't have to skip ahead of history here,
yeah, we
but
can go back even further.
his leftward turn or whatever. I mean, he was already pretty left wing, but I'd say he could be more categorized as a reformer during his early period. A lot of that stuff was after a coup attempt.
Hmm.
And of
Yeah,
course, we've seen that happens in both left and right wing governments that they quickly radicalize after a coup attempt.
Mm-hmm.
oh yeah, and in some ways that's kind of uh, understandable, right? They get all paranoid that their power is threatened, and this is somewhat the situation of what was happening during the Red Scare in America. Was like people, politicians were
Mm-hmm.
actually getting attacked and stuff, and they were like, "Oh my
Yeah.
gosh, we need to totally batten down the hatches on all this communism shit."
Yeah.
Um, but and there was stuff like that in Venezuela as well in the 1900s. For sure. A lot of
By the
times.
1900s, we don't mean just the early 1900s. We mean as late as the 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s. You know,
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. And let's go further back, guys. Let's just
How
kind
back do you
of
want to go?
let's talk
Let's go
about
way back.
We should talk about like what does the average American know about Venezuela? What do you guys know? And the basics of okay, it's a country in South America.
Mhm.
It
I know that it
was
bordered.
part of the Spanish Empire, right? Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, it was part of the Spanish Empire. It was initially colonized by the Spanish in the very beginning of the 16th century, but it got its name from the Germans who colonized it, and they named it Venezuela, which actually means Little Venice.
Yeah, a strong, kind of like Argentina, a strong German and Italian influence there culturally.
That's actually a lot. That's actually kind of reflective of a lot of the history of South America. It is a lot of the continent is a deep mix of Asian, Latin American, and European influences. That
And
kind
the
of,
indigenous people,
absolutely,
of course, and the
Most-
Africans.
of course.
The indigenous people of Venezuela are closely related to the Taino people in Puerto Rico. They, that was one wave of groups that came to Puerto Rico early on, and other Arawak groups up on the northern coast, and a whole bunch of other different kinds of groups in the south in the jungle who are the ones who are still living like in traditional ways today. And yeah, you've got the Spanish Empire. Eventually, they get their independence from Spain. There's the abolition of slavery in the early 1800s, before it's abolished in the U.S. And in Venezuela, that happens without a civil war. There were not as many quantity of slaves at that time, and the slave owners were compensated actually by the government, and the slaves were not.
That's what that's what the United States did, right?
No, the United States
Yeah,
No, they
yeah.
did. They
had
did. They
the Civil War.
Well, my point
England-
is that after
England
the Civil
also-
War, they compensated the enslavers, but not those who were enslaved.
Not exactly.
Correct.
I mean,
Well-
maybe in some cases, but a lot of it was seized as contraband of war, which got around all of that. So that would be any property that was like still held by slave owners after the war, maybe. But the Civil War is how it happened in the US.
Lincoln did directly compensate. I felt like Googling this. I feel like Googling is cheating a little bit for some of these chats, but also I felt like Googling this. Yeah, Lincoln paid off the slave owners after the war.
Yes, after the war, but most of it was, the Union Army uh, freed a lot of slaves during the war, and that was not that was
Yeah.
part of the war. That wasn't compensated.
It's also worth remembering that England did this as well. They paid slaveholders a whopping amount of money.
And they did that
That
decades before the United States did.
Yeah.
yes, England did abolish slavery decades before the United States did, and they just paid off the bill for slavery.
And think about this, guys. Even with the Civil War, we had all this stuff with like neo-Confederates during the Reconstruction, still wanting to, bring back that kind of power. And imagine what would happen if there was no Civil War in Venezuela. You just they had a compromise, and there was no change. The same people, planters of the haciendas from before, are in charge of this new liberal Republican government that is free from Spain. It's there's
So why is it called a Bolivarian government
that's
specifically? Where does
that
come
comes
from?
from Simón Bolivar. Simón Bolivar was an army officer in the Spanish Empire who rebelled, and he led a bunch of rebels in the wars of independence against Spain, and this was a big part of the picture for all of the countries that got independent at that time. But they formed this huge country called Gran Colombia. Gran Colombia, the Republic of Gran Colombia was supposed to be like the United States of South America. And it included like modern day Colombia, Venezuela, and Panama. So that was like during the 1800s, that broke up. Around 1885, we have this crisis where, very relevant to what's happening now, the U.S. and the British Empire are basically bickering over Venezuela.
Yeah.
This is after oil is about to be discovered there. They're speculating.
Well, this isn't the first time that they bickered over South Latin America. Are you familiar with something called the Monroe Doctrine?
Well, this is where it comes from. That's what I'm about to tell you.
All right.
Is that the Monroe Doctrine was developed as a response to this crisis to say, no, Britain still had British Guiana at this point, and to say, no, you can't do anything with Venezuela. We are going to guarantee the independence of Venezuela from Britain, and in the process, add Venezuela to our sphere of influence and kind of, yeah. So that is the origin of the Monroe Doctrine, which, at this point, there's not that much intervention directly of the U.S. in Venezuela, but it was them telling Britain it's our sphere of influence, actually, and they were definitely influencing.
Yeah, James
the
Monroe, I think,
government
was the
of Venezuela.
5th president of the United States. Yeah, he was in between James Madison and John Quincy Adams.
Well, yeah. So,
Yes.
Yeah. So this was 1885. This was it wouldn't have been Teddy Roosevelt yet.
No, not yet.
But long after that, I mean. But this is when it actually started to be enforced. Really, no more, except for the Falklands War, no more European interventions in America without America being involved. So pretty similar to kind of what's happening now, except instead of Britain, we're worried about Russia or China or whatever muscling in.
I think one thing to keep in mind, not just for, even though it's not a part of Venezuela, but important to the history of not only South America, but also a key part of why Venezuela is able to make part of its economy is something called the Panama Canal. Like you said earlier, Grand Colombia was a thing, and so the countries of Colombia and Panama were one country.
Right.
But,
and that didn't exist yet, but that comes about like 1905, I think.
Yeah. There was actually a few other efforts to bridge the Atlantic and the Pacific Oceans. The original candidate, which the French tried to do, was Nicaragua. Because even though it's a lot wider than Panama, it's flat. Whereas for Panama, there's a significant elevation change in the middle of the country, so they had to build up and they had to build down. Not to mention through some of the thickest, most inhospitable jungle out there.
Wow.
But because of that bridge between the Atlantic and Pacific, instead of shipping if, let's say, Venezuela wanted to ship its oil to Asia, normally they would have to either go down through the south of Africa at the Cape of Good Hope and go through Malaysia and Singapore to go up, or go to the bottom of South America through Cape Horn, which is dangerous. Instead, they would cut off thousands of miles and simply go through Panama.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm. And a huge portion of the shipping containers that are shipped throughout the world handle petroleum and crude oil.
Yeah. So foreign powers have been interested in Venezuela for a long time. It's kind of been, during the 1970s to 80s to very recently, there's been huge wars in Colombia between the government and the rebels, where the U.S. has been involved and, trying to, like in many countries, oppose communism by supporting these right-wing dictator kind of governments. That's not really the case for, I think, Colombia right now anymore, but that, at least in terms of the U.S. relationship to it, but it's part of that history at that time. And Venezuela has often been accused of kind of helping those rebels in Colombia, and that's caused tension between them and Colombia. Anyway, 1958, you have this Punto Fijo Pact, which is basically the government that that started ruling around that time. After you have several iterations of republics of Venezuela, the Punto Fijo Pact is sort of like their version of the Porfiriato. It's like an oligarchy where, some guys come together and say, let's make a political machine that can just keep staying in power. And this is what is overthrown in the 1980s by the Revolutionary Bolivarian movement. And that is what Hugo Chavez is a part of, and that's where the goal originally was all about more democracy in Venezuela. They wanted a fifth republic. It was the Fifth Republic movement, and they wanted to bring back the republic and bring back democratic republicanism and democracy.
Yeah, it's worth mentioning because I feel like we skipped from the 60s to the 80s really quickly. So it's important for people who you look at Latin American history, or really the history of many non-US democracies. Political parties can be in charge for decades and decades and decades. Like in Mexico, you had one political party that was dominant for decades. Here in Venezuela, you had two major parties that did a power sharing arrangement specifically to exclude the left. So while they, this arrangement was made to look democratic, quote unquote, on paper, but the stability of it, the oil itself, the people did not get any of that oil at all. It's worth mentioning, like that's the prevailing political atmosphere by the time that the Bolivarian movement got on the scene, and that was all like precluded by austerity. As oil prices went down in the late 70s and 80s. If you're American, you know that like Carter was around during this time, and Ford, and this idea of malaise and oil prices that had an impact on Venezuelans' politics as well.
Yeah, the oil industry was nationalized in Venezuela in 1976. Um, and this just meant that it was put under a state corporation, which what is it, Petróleos de Venezuela. I was about to say Petrobras, but that's the that's Mexico's one. So yeah, Petróleos de Venezuela. And I mean, what do you guys think about that as a concept? Like, Norway does it, Saudi Arabia, Mexico do it. A country owning its oil resources, like, is that a
Are
good
you
thing?
asking a socialist podcast about nationalizing industries?
Well, it's not just that's not any industry. It's oil.
Well, I
Yeah, but
mean, I
don't you
think there's
guys don't I mean don't y'all largely support nationalizing major industry like oil? Yet, like in America, when we say oil, yet like name five industries, we probably say yes to all of them, right?
I feel a little bit differently about oil. Is a complicated one because think about it, like most of our transportation, especially cars, is reliant on processing oil. So if we have a country that nationalizes oil, relies on oil as a predominant part of its economy, is essentially relying on cars, trucks, ships to be the main and primary transportation infrastructures, including flights also. If, say, that were to transport away to, say, trade or something that relies on less people having individual machines to drive them around, that would decrease the world's need for oil, which would negatively affect the country. I
I
think
just
oil is a
think
special case.
I just think in terms of nationalization in general, there's I think there's both a utility for it for global South countries and that where they should be doing it, but at the same time, I think that there is kind of this nationalist sleight of hand of like, oh, it's under the nation state, it's under the people. When nationalization is not the same as socialization necessarily, and I think that like, if the state is not democratic, then nationalization can just mean a power grab by this oligarchical elite running the state.
Of course, that is true. We are seeing nationalization right now under the Trump regime, and
Right.
we wouldn't exactly call that socialization. Although, if you were to go on the news, commentators would say to some extent and be right. What is this socialist policy? Yeah, it's a surprising critique of nationalization here.
But I do think when it comes to a country like Venezuela and they have these oil reserves, it's like if your choice is, do you have it under a national corporation or do you have it under a foreign corporation? I think it's understandable to not want your wealth to be like leached out of your economy to by a country with more capital where
And
they
with
can just
that,
snatch up your reserves.
and let's be honest here, there's been a lot of accidents that have occurred as results of extracting oil from the ground and from the ocean, nationalized or no. There's a heavy risk of disastrous environmental consequences if and when things go wrong. I think all of us were around in 2010 when British Petroleum BP had that massive oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico.
Yes, and stop oil and save the climate. And in this discussion at this point, we're kind of beyond the question of do we use oil or is oil okay,
I
right?
understand where you're coming from. I think if it was literally any other resources, I might feel a little bit differently. I'm not opposing them nationalizing per se. It's just a reflective of my own views of that resource as a whole. In contrast to, say, when Nasser, the former dictator of Egypt, nationalized the once British Suez Canal, that therefore giving Egypt back one of the most dominant shipping routes in the world, and giving the country tons of money as a result. I find that to be a different circumstance.
Interesting. Okay. Well, what do you think?
You're asking me?
Yeah.
My take is a little more nuanced.
Tell us.
Nationalizing the oil, I'm not sure I'd do it right away. I'd want to look at a bunch of paperwork and stuff. But in general, it's a case by case basis, is what I'll say. There are industries that I think would be pretty well nationalized here in the United States that are regards to shipping and moving things. And maybe oil is a part of that. I mean, we're talking about, I think we're hitting on the same core subjects of, boy, the choices that people make with their movements.
But
So
we just don't.
I won't, you know what, I actually reserve, I won't give a strong take there. I'll just say many people are saying it.
I feel you.
I think the point, and keep in mind, this isn't going for or against, and something to keep in mind is that a resource is only valuable if the economy, whether it's local, regional, or the global economy, actually values and uses that resource.
Which we do with oil.
Which we do, currently.
So, I think that if I was in a global south country, and we're talking about natural resources, I would probably prefer nationalization to privatization.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that I don't think that nationalization is a good thing. I think that that's a state capital merger that's just more and more consolidation of capital to some extent.
Done for the people also.
Yeah. But anyway, we need to move on. So, following that, and kind of maybe that being an early wave of the nationalization, being an early wave of, this revolutionary Bolivarian movement that brings Hugo Chavez to power. Like we said, 2002, there is a coup. There is a coup where, Chavez is threatened. 2006, he kind of takes a more socialist turn. And, like we were saying, up until then, there very much was a more democratic lean to it of, the system resembles kind of a social democracy type system like Norway, and the not in terms of civil rights, because they don't have that as much, but in terms of economically, 2006, it becomes more socialist, and this is very much presented as an outgrowth of the democratic aspirations, as basically the democratic Bolivarian movement was reaching its limits by not considering the class aspect of the socialist, the ability of capitalists to basically, manipulate those things with money. I guess, and but like you said, it's also kind of an opportunistic thing to get supporters, consolidate a power base, and in 2010, Chavez declares this dramatic economic war against the country's ruling elite. It's very much this populist, you know, call, which results in basically the economic crisis that's ongoing now. You know, following that immediately, the economy is tanking. All of the sanctions are part of this, but they also were kind of pre-existing, right? I think they were intensified around this time. This economic crisis hits Venezuela super hard. The hyperinflation is insane. People are struggling to buy food and stuff around this time of the 2010s. Chavez dies in 2013, and Maduro takes power. So that's where we're at now with Nicolás Maduro. And then in 2019, the you have sort of like maybe an unfair comparison to draw, but like Venezuela's January 6th almost, January 13th or January whatsoever.
Yeah, that's not a perfect metaphor, but I just understood what you're getting at there.
You have Juan Guaido come and say, you know, I dispute the election. Maduro didn't actually win. I won. He's the opposition leader supported by the U.S., and he went around and basically got control of Venezuelan embassies in the U.S. and U.K. and became the legitimate representative of Venezuela in those countries. Or like by those countries officially. And, you know, in terms of elections, democracy now, you know, elections are definitely happening, but I think it's pretty difficult to have what would be called a fair and free election in the current climate.
Yeah. You phrased that very elegantly. Yeah, it would be difficult to call that a free and fair election. Yeah.
Yeah, they are happening, but there's probably some degree of intimidation. There's like I said earlier, armed groups of different factions controlling different parts of the country, or at least that was what I was hearing about years ago. And the situation may have changed. You know, it seems like Venezuela had become more stable when Maduro was posturing to, like, basically aggressively towards Guyana. When oil fields were discovered in Guyana, in places that were historically connected to Venezuela, you know, Venezuela's government began pressing those claims in sort of a revanchist way.
And by claims, they mean approximately, 60% of the land area?
Yeah, most
of Guyana?
The majority of Guyana's land area has been claimed by the current Venezuelan government, which is an aggressive posture.
Yeah, that's one way to put it. And remember how we talked about British Guiana earlier? And then because of that, Guyana is the only country in South America where English is an official language.
I just want to say, even though that is an aggressive diplomatic posture, it doesn't warrant invasion.
Oh, absolutely not.
We need to refocus on that our main focus with this broadcast is to point out why this invasion is not justified.
There's no historical story that you could tell about any country in the world that says we've all got to pack up on the planes and go over there to straighten them out.
Exactly.
Well,
right.
There is a historical argument as to why the United States might be doing it now. Not justifying it. It's still messed up. Just I have a guess as to why they might be doing it right now.
Well, I mean, we're talking about their history and their issues that they have. that doesn't mean that it's our issues to solve as Americans.
I'm not
at
trying
the end of
to
the day.
solve it. I'm just trying to show a little bit of insight as to why the United States would conceive of doing something like this. Let me ask you a question. If let's say you're the owner of an oil company, and name any country. Literally name it just pick a country where you would be from, and you own an oil company.
Canada.
Sweden.
Canada, great. Now, Canada uses the Canadian dollar. Now, if you wanted to buy, let's say you wanted to buy 1 million barrels of crude oil from Venezuela, what currency would you as a Canadian company use to buy it? Pretend this is about 2 years ago. What currency would you use?
U.S. dollars.
Why?
Petrodollar.
Precisely. Now, the part of the petrodollar was actually an agreement that came in the mid-70s not with Venezuela, but with Saudi Arabia, specifically the House of Saud. And the agreement went like this. You ensure that all trade with petroleum are done with the U.S. dollars, and in exchange, we will send you weapons and uphold your rule over Saudi Arabia and your vast oil fields. And that was the agreement for about 50 years, which expired several months ago. And now they are increasing talks to use what's known as a basket of currencies, including, along with the dollar, say, the renminbi, which is the Chinese yuan, which threatens American interests.
Interesting. Well, it's interesting that what OPEC basically means is that, like, and the way that both Venezuela and Saudi Arabia are petrostates, it means that the economic policy, regardless of their diplomatic policy towards each other, the economic policy of Venezuela and the economic policy of Saudi Arabia have to be somehow interrelated because of oil prices.
Which means even though they have influence, their economy is beholden to the price of oil.
Yeah, that's interesting. Well, we are trying to oppose these endless oil wars, so what should we be doing?
We're not trying to do shit.
Yeah, we are opposing it effectively. You'll see our video tomorrow morning all about how we're doing that. But let's talk some more about what should people be doing? How can we kind of push back against the way that the empire is endlessly trying to expand?
So here's my feeling. And by the way, if a person watches this and says, this guy's being a little bit triumphalist, we've got 3 years to go, that's fine. Here's just my analysis of the moment.
Sure.
These guys ain't going to be in charge forever. Just because they've done such a bad job at doing the things that you want an empire to do. There's more and increasing pushback against the president, the White House, the Defense Department, people who you just wouldn't expect to be showing a spine have started to show more of a spine and not less of one in the last few months. So I think the things that an average person can do if you're watching this is encourage groups that typically don't have a spine, like the media, to start exhibiting one. And if you are a person who has a right-wing representative, and if you are in Congress, if you are in a congressional district, your representative is right-wing. I'm just going to tell you that. Tell your right-wing figure in your life to develop a spine, and maybe they will.
Sure. All right. Now here's my perspective.
For starters.
Here's my perspective.
For starters.
All right. Here's my. Okay. Here's my perspective on the matter. If you're in the military in the United States, how do you get from your base in the United States, wherever that is, to Venezuela? How do you get there? The way I see it, there's theoretically three ways, but we have to eliminate one of them. You could drive there, but you can't really, because a lot of the borders between Colombia and Venezuela are closed. And even though there is a highway that stretches through all of the Americas called the Pan America Highway, it's interrupted by a thick stretch of jungle in southern Panama known as the Darien Gap.
Oh.
You were saying?
Just in
Ways to get there.
general, I don't really have any solutions out of that, but just since it's hard to drive, just food for thought. The other ways that the military could get to Venezuela are if you ship there, if you use ships there, and if you fly there. That's about all I can really think of as a conclusion in that regard. But just some food for thought.
You just need to tell people not to go there. Don't sign up, and influence the people who are on the verge of doing that,
Literally, the career people in these forces are dropping out because they're getting told to their face crazy shit. If the people way above the food chain are dropping out, take your opportunity. Look at what they're doing and say, boy, not a good career decision.
Yeah.
No.
It doesn't become, a thing doesn't become a quagmire. You don't get stuck in a quagmire on day one. You go there and then it becomes a quagmire and then you're stuck.
They create the quagmire, but what we can do is, as much as we can, to bring the quagmireness close enough to home that people can make that decision before they get over there.
Yeah.
And there were these huge protests all over the country for the Vietnam War. And part of it was people got drafted. So it was like your own butt, is on the line. But I think that's the kind of stuff we need to push back against these wars. People need to get out in the streets and push back. And like they said back then, they say we're disturbing the peace, but really we're disturbing the war.
That's a great way of putting it.
Ho, ho, ho. All right.
Well, find out all about that. We got our video going up tomorrow, our statement to the media. We have a political education. When is that? December 14th?
Yeah, I think, that's the next Sunday.
3 p.m.
3 p.m.
And next Mosaic Live is Sunday, 4 p.m. We'll be talking about the Zapatista uprising in Mexico.
I want to encourage people who, if you're watching this, maybe you're watching this right now, maybe you're watching it the next Monday, but also you might be watching this a year from now or 3 months from now or just sometime in the future. And if so, I really want to encourage you to join, become a member. If you've got topics that you want to talk about, that whether they're urban life, whether they're political history, whether it's foreign and international stuff, it can even be wellness and things that make you interested and motivated to live life. All that stuff is all gravy, and you're just encouraged to join. Send a message to this YouTube channel or visit mosaicatlanta.org, send an email, and just look for ways to get involved.
Yeah.
We had kind of a fun experience today. We invite you to join in the fun.
Definitely send in your topics. Our next topic is the Zapatista uprising, and we are reading their declaration, the 6 declarations of the Lacandon jungle. But anyway, you guys wanted to hear the Cuatro Venezolano.
Yeah,
right?
we did.
So I think we'll just, if we can get some silence on the set real quick, we'll just...
Now, yeah, go for it.
I'll do a song that is the first one I learned for this instrument because it's from Venezuela. Imagine this is kind of like a ukulele. triste canción de amor de la vieja molienda. En el letargo de la noche parece gemir. Pena de amor, una tristeza. Lleva el San Manuel en su amargura. Pasa noches incansables moviendo café. Cuando la tarde languidece, renacen las sombras. Y en la quietud de los cafetales vuelven a sentir. En esa triste canción de amor de la vieja molienda, que en el letargo de la noche parece gemir. Pena de amor, una tristeza. Lleva el San Manuel en su amargura. Pasa noches incansables moviendo café. Moviendo café. Moviendo café.
That was really pretty.
Thanks, man. Yeah, that's Moliendo Cafe. It's like a sad breakup song about grinding coffee in the middle of the night. So they're basically Southerners at heart, man. Venezuela is like Colombia. It's a cowboy country.
Mm-hmm.
You know, this instrument's associated with the llanos, with the plains and the cowboys.
And you realize they had cowboys over there.
Absolutely.
I knew Argentina and like southern Brazil did, but
Oh yeah. But anyway, thanks for watching, guys.
thank you.
This was Mosaic Live, and you know, Venezuela is a beautiful country. You know, they've done nothing to deserve getting invaded by the U.S. empire. The U.S. empire just always wants more oil, more land, and the only way to stop that endless appetite is to stop the empire.
That's fine to end with. The whole world counts as a beautiful place.
Absolutely.
Sure
You
is.
could say that about anywhere there is, and you could say that pretty fairly too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah.
that's true. Well, today it's
All
Venezuela.
right, are we?
Hands
Where are
off
we at?
Venezuela.
Hands off Venezuela.
Yeah. Are we? Do we need to add any more jokes? Are we done here?
We just go to when we post our video tomorrow. Let's see. Go to the link tree. Go sign the petition for the zone. Go sign on to the Zone of Peace Week of Action.
Mm-hmm.
The Week of Action starts December 15th for the America's Zone of Peace. No more U.S. imperialism in the Americas.
Sure. We'll look at that. Are we? I mean, yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. All right. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye.